Good morning. So we'll continue with equilibrium level of real national output. But today the focus is on a rise in the long run aggregate supply. Chewing gum in the basket. I'll talk about the rise in the long run aggregate supply. So what are we trying to say? We're talking about an increase in the potential output of an economy. That is what the rise in long run aggregate supply is going to represent. Get the point here. Stop writing please and focus here. A rise in long run aggregate supply. This implies that the potential output of the economy has increased. That means our output in the economy has increased. That brings about a long run rise in aggregate supply. So, what do the classical economists say about a rise in long run aggregate supply? I'm going to read and explain. The classical model: an increase in the long run aggregate supply will lead to both higher output and lower prices. This can be graphically represented as this. So, as soon as there's a rise in the output, as soon as the output of an economy increases, it means our long run aggregate supply curve will shift rightward from LRAS1 to LRAS2. So what does that imply? It means the price level will fall from P1 to P2. So an increase in the level of output will represent a fall in the equilibrium price and a rise in the equilibrium level of output. Do you get the point or not? I'm going to say it again. For the classical model, their focus is always on supply side policies. So they believe that with supply side policy, aggregate demand will increase. But without supply side policy, aggregate demand will not increase. So the focus is on output itself. So a rise in long run aggregate supply would mean that the output has increased from OY1 to OY2. That is what it represents. This is the title. For the classical, it means that if this thing is happening, it would have meant that our OY1 has increased to OY2. And as soon as the equilibrium level of real output has increased, the price level would fall from P1 to P2. Do we get it? Yes. Do we understand or not?
Yes.
Okay. So as soon as this is done, that is for the classical. So the aggregate demand curve will remain the way it is, except if there's supply side policy. And what are supply side policies? We're talking about a cut in taxes, like income taxes. Because if income taxes fall, it means disposable income will rise. Then demand within the economy would increase. Without supply side policy, aggregate demand will not increase, despite the fact that real income or real output has increased and the price level has fallen. Do we understand or not? The output has increased, yes. But what are we talking about here is that if the output increases from OY1 to OY2, the price level has fell from P1 to P2. Why is the aggregate demand not moving? Because a fall in price means that demand should increase. Yes or no?
Yes.
But demand will only increase here. Aggregate demand will only increase if there are supply side policies. So that's why classical economists always believe in or support supply side policies, because it increases aggregate demand. Do we get it?
Yes.
For classical, a rise in the long run aggregate supply will represent an increase in the equilibrium level of output from OY1 to OY2. And the price level will fall from OP1 to OP2. But aggregate demand will stay the way it is. The long run aggregate supply curve will shift rightward from LRAS1 to LRAS2. The only thing that will not change here is the aggregate demand. It stays, except if there are supply side policies, like a cut in tax, which will represent a rise in the level of income. So a rise in the level of income will increase aggregate demand curve. If not, it remains the way it is. Is it clear? This is for the classical economists. So let's see what the Keynesian said. So based on what I wrote here, I said based on the graph, an increase in aggregate supply will mean that there's a shift in the long run aggregate, there's a shift in the LRAS curve to the right, from LRAS1 to LRAS2. This will increase the equilibrium output from OY1 to OY2, which I just explained. I think the point is clear now.
Yes.
So let's look at the Keynesian. For the Keynesian, I wrote, the effect of long run aggregate supply curve depends upon the position of the aggregate demand curve. So for the Keynesian, their focus is on what happens with the economy. Is the economy fully employed? Is slightly unemployed? Is slightly employed, or slightly below employment, or depression? You know, we talked about aggregate demand yesterday based on Keynesian. So for Keynesian, they always split it. They want us to understand what the situation of the economy. So if the economy is fully employed, yes, what should happen? If the economy is slightly below full employment, what should happen? If the economy is in depression, what should happen to output and price? That is what we need to understand about Keynesian. They are different from the classical economists. Are you with me, please?
Yes.
Great. So what did the Keynesian say? Okay, here I wrote. The first situation is an increase. An increase in aggregate supply, which is the reason why we have this. An increase in aggregate supply will both increase output and reduce prices if the economy is at full employment. So full employment here represents AD1. Do you get what I'm saying here?
Yes.
A rise in aggregate supply, if it happens, the prices will fall. According to Keynesian, the prices will fall only if the economy is at full employment. And full employment here represents AD1. So at full employment at AD1, look, at full employment at AD1, the London aggregate supply curve will shift rightward from LRAS1 to LRAS2. This is at full employment. So this is at full employment from LRAS1 to LRAS2. At this point, the price level would fall because output level would increase from YE to YF. Do we understand? According to Keynesian, if there's a rise in aggregate demand, if there's a rise in supply curve, if there's a rise in the London aggregate supply, it represents that the London aggregate supply curve, when it is in full employment, it will represent AD1. At AD1, we are at our full potential. So at that point in time, price level would fall and the equilibrium level of output will rise from OYE to OYF. Do we get it? Do we get it or not, please? Yes. We have three situations here. The first situation is at full employment, which is represented by AD1, slightly below full employment, which is represented at AD2, and depression, which is represented at AD3. These are the three situations. Do you understand this?
Yes.
So for Keynesian, they split it into three. Full employment, slightly below full employment, and depression. So what happens with price level and output at full employment? What happens with output and price level slightly below full employment? And what happens to output and price level at depression? That is it about Keynesian. So the first one I'm talking about is at AD1, which represents full employment. A rise in the aggregate supply, a rise in the London aggregate supply, will shift the London aggregate supply curve rightward at full employment from LRAS1 to LRAS2, which is represented at AD1. Clear?
Yes.
Then, if it is slightly below full employment at AD2, the economy will still be beneficial for the economy because at AD2, it's slightly below full employment. Output will still rise, output level would rise, and price level would fall. So at AD1 and AD2, our price level, according to Keynesian, our price level would fall and the output, real equilibrium output would increase at AD1 and AD2. Clear?
Yes.
So what is the situation during depression? Depression is represented at AD3. This is depression. So what happens with depression? Look, if the aggregate demand curve is at AD3, this represents depression, which means an increase in aggregate demand, an increase in aggregate supply has no effect on equilibrium level of output. So whatever happens here, an increase in aggregate supply would not have any impact in the equilibrium level of output. Because the economy is at depression. The economy is not at its full employment. So resources are still unused. So output cannot increase. Do we get it? Has no effect on output. It remains stuck at YD. So it remains here. It remains stuck here. So during depression, no matter what happens with aggregate supply, output will not increase. It will remain here at YD. If the economy is below full employment, output will increase from YE to YF, or stays at YE. If it is full employment at AD1, output will increase and the London aggregate supply curve will shift from LRAS1 to LRAS2. This represents full employment. But here, there is depression. So, for the economy to move out of depression, there must be increase in aggregate demand. Do you get what I'm saying here?
Yes.
If the economy is here, it represents depression. It means there is decline. For it to move more than here, it has to increase its aggregate demand. That means for aggregate demand, it has to shift from AD3 to AD2. So for that to happen, there must be increase in aggregate demand. So that is the point. If the economy is stuck at YD, it means that there is depression within the economy. For it to improve, aggregate demand must increase. This is according to Keynesian. For classical model, they believe that an increase in the rise in the long-run aggregate supply curve will shift the long-run aggregate supply curve rightward from LRS1 to LRS2. The aggregate demand will remain the way it is, except if there is supply-side policies. Though our equilibrium level of output will rise from OY1 to OY2. That is classical. But for the Keynesian, they split it into three situations. AD1, which represents full employment, AD2, which represents below full employment, and AD3, which represents depression. What happens to real equilibrium output and price level when the economy is at full employment? The equilibrium level of output will increase from YE to YF. The price level will fall. At AD